A very warm welcome to the beginning of December and meteorological winter. Thanks for clicking on to the Monday edition of Vogan's European Outlook. It is December Outlook Day, and this comes on the heels of the big one last night, the release of the 25-26 winter forecast that does, in essence, call for a warmer than average winter overall, but that is not excluding a possibility of some substantial cold at times as well. Very high levels of uncertainty, it has to be said. I have provided a very honest opinion with regards to this upcoming winter, with conflicting signals being a pretty big aspect to this upcoming season. We've got some constructive interference going on at the minute. That is where the stratospheric warming that took place at the very end of the month of November is kind of working against the MJO, which is in a very favourable phase for high latitude blocking and cold. You would kind of almost think strat warming, weak polar vortex, and a very favourable MJO would be delivering some nice cold weather. We've got a roughly 70% chance when you've got a stratospheric warming to see cold weather. Remember, there's always a lag, both with the MJO and what's going on within the stratosphere of a couple of weeks or so. But yes, we shall wait and see how this all plays out. So the December outlook has just been released. So ever so slightly later than normal for a monthly outlook, but all the attention and focus was very much on the winter forecast that was released yesterday. So check that out. It is available on the channel. I'll leave a link in the description below for that, as well as the written winter forecast. There's a lot in there. It is quite in depth, but I'm trying to always provide a fair and balanced and evidence based prediction. And obviously, the further out you go, the more difficult that prediction can be. So, yeah, there is obviously an element of guesswork to an extent because we just do not know what the future holds. But you can go by certain drivers, certain aspects that can shed some light. So anyway, let's get into it then. December outlook of 2025. December and meteorological winter starts very different to what you would expect with a strat warming and a phase 7 MJO. It is going to be mild and wet with the Atlantic generally the rule through the first half of the month. The tail end of November finished with a rare SSW. Winds did reverse at 10 millibars for a very short period of time, which constitutes a minor sudden stratospheric warming. But being of the reflective type and supportive of North American cold outbreaks, the result for Europe is very much a stronger jet and reinforced low pressure dominance. While the MJ was strongly in phase 7, this typically supports blocky setups into the Arctic, and what's going on within the stratosphere means the SSW effects are cancelling out the effect of the MJO. However, and models suggest change beyond the mid-month period. That's a little error that needs to get fixed. But I believe that there is a chance that we see a change, and I'm going to give you the reasons why in a second. But as the stratospheric polar vortex regroups and returns to its polar position, so right over the top, I believe that the MJO's influence in phase 7 will begin to show. So you can see here a very highly amplified phase 7. It will go into 8 and head back towards the inner circle. So if we look at the Paul Roundy graphic here, this is what if all things were equal, which we know in the world of weather and atmosphere, that does not really be the case. But this is what a phase 7 would look like around the 7th of December with a phase 7. And you can see here that we've got this strong block. It's quite an east-based negative NAO signal, NAO being measure of pressure between the Azores and Iceland. When you've got higher pressure up towards Iceland, you've got the lower heights down towards the Azores, and this is a textbook negative NAO signal that would support cold in the west of Europe here. When you've got this set up here, where you've got the deep trough extending from western Russia across the central and southern half of Europe where you've got that block of high pressure up to the north, and the position of that high is important in terms of delivering, potential easterly winds. We do not have that at the minute, but I do think that with the adjustments up in the upper levels of the stratosphere, propagating down into the lower portions of the stratosphere and then into the troposphere, there's always that element of uncertainty with regards to coupling between the two layers in the atmosphere. I think we're going to start to begin to lose momentum within the northern hemispheric wider circulation that allows the MJO to begin to affect our atmosphere. So if we go back to the article here, this is another example of a phase 7 MJO in a La Nina situation here. And you can see this bottom right hand graphic here showing that when you've got that the convection over the west portion of the Pacific, the low pressure, the release of heat from thunderstorm activity up into the atmosphere further north, that then increases vertical heat flux, vertical Rossby wave propagation. It warms the stratosphere, weakens the polar vortex, and then we get this downward coupling over the North Atlantic Greenland with a negative NAO signal, high pressure building from Arctic down over Greenland. This is week one, according to the 500 millibar of the GFS ensemble. You can see here that we've got this very prominent ridge over the Gulf of Alaska, west of British Columbia, extending north. You've got this deep trough, the deepest anywhere in the hemisphere, over Hudson Bay. That creates a channel, this cross-polar flow from Siberia over the top and into North America. Waves of cold air will drive in through the first half. That then, but if you notice the orientation of the ridge trough, it's very elongated, very flat across the North Atlantic, means that we've got the essentially the cold that is driving a stronger jet and low pressure train into Western Europe. I say mild, sometimes you kind of think to yourself, I need to be careful with that one, because sometimes these areas of low pressure actually pull colder off North America. Yeah, moderates as it crosses the warmer ocean, but it can actually lead to colder conditions and even some snowfall, even on a westerly flow when it's coming from a bitterly cold North America. That's what we've seen in 2013-14, allowed the build-up of snow in a big way over higher parts of the north of the UK. So, as already explained, note the Gulf of Alaska ridge, Hudson Bay trough, cross-polar connection. Due to that ridge trough setup, drives the cold in the North America, fires up the jet and the low pressure train into Europe. While I have niggles that that other factors could prevent change, so there is an element of uncertainty as we head towards the mid-month period, I am going to go with a mid-month shift in which momentum begins to slow, allowing the effects of the MJO to take over during the second half of December. Check out the week 2, 3, and 4 500 millibar pattern as per the latest GFS ensemble, and note the breakup of the strong flat zonal flow over the Atlantic. So this is week 2. You can see here ridge extending from essentially just north of the Canaries right the way up through Western Europe and into Scandinavia, into the Arctic region. We've got a deeper trough now, kind of pushed more towards the west. Granted, you could say that high pressure perhaps builds in, creates a settled, benign type situation, possibly. But then as we move into that's week 2, so into week 3, you can see here that we're starting to see changes taking place. We're starting to see more amplification over the European side of the Atlantic and the polar region here. You're starting to see higher pressure building northwards here. So we are slowing down that momentum over the Atlantic. This is into the following week. This is the Christmas, the New Year period here, essentially 21st through the 20th of December. Granted, that high pressure over the UK and over Ireland extending northwards might not necessarily be favourable for cold, but nevertheless, granted the above does show high pressure over the UK and extending north, but you can clearly see a flip in the PNA, the Pacific North American pattern. So you go from high pressure over the Gulf of Alaska to lower pressure. That then creates a change in the downstream effect. So by going from positive to negative, and there is also a lot of uncertainty in terms of the temperature charts aren't actually showing colder for the UK, for Western Europe, for Europe as a whole, really, during the second half of the month. But the models do begin to become a little bit confused as to the distribution of heat and cold. When looking at the 50 millibar level, this is quite important here. This is the lower portion of the stratosphere. I like to use this as I believe that we get a slightly better reflection underneath. In other words, the lower stratosphere can sometimes reflect what's going on down in the troposphere, from the 500 millibar level down to the ground. And you can see here week one very much supports that, that dislodge of Arctic air into North America in a wave fashion. But notice all the low heights, the colder temperatures over the Atlantic. That supports trophiness extending across the Atlantic and into Europe here. But if you notice here, with further warming of the stratosphere expected and hopefully a better influence of the MJO, Christmas shows the warmth at 50 millibars with the lower stratosphere much more spread over the pole, including Greenland and the North Atlantic, suggesting much less flow, much less momentum, and a greater possibility of blocking and cold potential. So this is the 50 millibar level, and you notice it's quite different. We don't have the blues and the lower heights showing that momentum increase over the Atlantic. It's quite different looking. So it'll be interesting to see how this all pans out in terms of a whole month perspective. This is the upcoming 30-day period, which ends on Hogmanay. How it's looking. So we've got a lot of ridging over Europe here, particularly so up into Scandinavia, which might be interesting, and then extending over towards Greenland here. You've still got that trough over the Atlantic. You've got a bit of a La Nina-like ridge over the southeast United States here, as you notice. This is the temperature profile, so it's showing colder north and eastern United States with the exception of the southeast due to that ridge. This is off the ECMWF model, slightly less ridge over the southeastern United States, but quite similar to the GFS. The ECM has that ridge in over Europe with some higher heights over the north of Europe here, Scandinavia. That's extending up towards Greenland. We've got a little bit more of a trough that's extending into the UK and Ireland as opposed to the GFS here. Temperature anomaly wise, it's showing colder North America, warmer Europe. So the verdict, I suspect, an average to above average with temperature and precipitation for the UK, Ireland, and Western Europe, as we are likely milder through the first half at least. Colder Christmas and New Year period is forecast. But like I said, the uncertainty levels are very high. This could go either way. As I explained in yesterday's live stream, that there is very small aspects that could push this towards the extreme in both ends, cold and mild, as well as stormy in between. So we've got the signals are somewhat suggestive that really this winter could go anywhere. December could go either way as well. Could end up being in the grip of a bit of the cold spell towards the back half of December. We might even warm up before New Year comes with a cold spell somewhere between the 15th and say the 25th of December. Like I say, very, very high uncertainty with regard to this forecast. So hang in there. We will wait and see what happens. Don't get overexcited with individual model runs, but the trend is usually our friend, and usually that is what we go by. So that is it for today. Thanks for watching, and I greatly appreciate everybody's support. The views have been fantastic. The comments, but also the new subscriptions as well, has been picking up quite a bit over recent days. We'll look back at the month of November probably in tomorrow's video, so stay tuned for that. Have a great evening, and I'll see you tomorrow with more. Bye for now.